Make large crypto trades with Kraken OTC. Execute orders of more than 100,000 off the open exchange through our premium OTC trading service. Get 24/7 access to deep liquidity, minimal slippage, and competitive execution and settlement services. Private and secure trading options include chatting securely with our trade desk for a personalized high-touch service, or use our self-service RFQ for super fast, automated OTC trading. Non-investment advice. Crypto trading involves risk of loss and is offered to U.S. customers through Payward Interactive Inc. For more information, go to realvision.com/Kraken OTC.
Well, hello everyone. We're back for another week of REKT Vision. We have OSF back. Firstly, congratulations, OSF. We missed you for the last couple of weeks. We had Sergio Silva come back. Congratulations on the baby girl. You've seemingly come back and the market's absolutely ripped. Like, we had a couple of weeks where we were hanging out below 60K. And then in the last week alone, I think Bitcoin is up around 12%, ETH up around 10%, and Solana's up just over 20%. So a huge, huge week for markets. We're going to go through everything that's happened this week. This time last week, the whole Trump assassination attempt hadn't even happened. So it does feel like an age ago, but a lot has happened in that week. You've seen some crazy headlines coming out with regards to that, and some other bullish sentiment out there on the timeline with various different things that have taken us up to this level. So maybe we can get straight into it, because I think the biggest headline was politics really this week. Politics has really become the number one mover in crypto on the back of the failed Trump assassination event. We saw Bitcoin breach 60K, and then once it breached 60K on that weekly candle, we shot all the way up to 65K pretty quickly. We've bounced around there a little bit, but generally an incredibly strong week for crypto in a week where macro has kind of not done that well. You've seen the Nasdaq has some pretty tough days, but crypto has definitely taken the shine back. What do you make of this current market? What did you make of that rebound on the back of all the Trump headlines?
Yeah, look, I think we've touched upon the potential impacts to crypto of a Trump election win, and he had that. He mentioned it in some speech a few weeks ago about protecting Bitcoin from Elizabeth Warren and her goons and all that. And so that information was out there, but it felt like it never really got priced into the crypto markets. And I don't know if that was because people were not sure he was going to follow through on the things that he said, or because people thought, the 60-40 lead that he had according to Polymarket wasn't like a big enough margin for people to price that in meaningfully. And so the main thing about the attempted assassination is obviously his odds of winning the election have skyrocketed. And the stuff around crypto now feels like more of a reality. And you also had the stuff that came out yesterday, which we'll touch on with regard to Bitcoin potentially being used as a strategic reserve asset for the US as well. So there are a few things now about this election where we have a few more not data points, but we have a few more things to grasp on, which are like quite clear positive things for crypto. And with him gaining an additional 10-point lead versus where he was this time last week in the polls, some of these things now seem more like a reality to me. And that seemed to be enough to just really make the market do a U-turn, because I think for all the chart people out there reading the horoscopes and stuff, if we had closed below 60K on that weekly candle, the thought was that we would go materially lower to 50s and perhaps even below. So there are some pretty significant positive catalysts that are now starting to form, which are very tied to the outcome of the US elections, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I think on the back of that headline, or the headlines that he'd survived, you saw macro broadly rally, but that petered out by the end of the week. And what's really happened is you've seen a ratcheting up of a lot of politics coming into crypto. You saw JD Vance, who got now nominated as the VP candidate for the Republicans, and he's been very pro crypto. There's been a number of speeches that were circulating earlier in his career where he was criticizing Gensler's approach to crypto pretty heavily, and basically indicating that most things were not securities, or that the stuff that Gensler was going after for being securities was not the stuff that we should be worried about, which I think got people very, very bullish with that appointment. And then you saw, what could only be rumors at this stage, but one of Trump's next big speeches is at Bitcoin Nashville. Like he had the Republican convention, and the next week he's going to be speaking at Bitcoin Nashville. He is being advised by the Bitcoin Magazine team. In fact, the Bitcoin Magazine team is meant to be hosting a fundraiser for him, I believe, at some point in the next month. And the tickets for that fundraiser are going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've seen around $850,000 is some of the tickets going for that fundraiser. He's obviously had significant crypto donors over the last few months. You saw the Winklevoss twins, for example, put in, I think, $1 million each, right? But there is now these headlines coming out that he might look to label Bitcoin as a strategic asset, similar to what you might see from gold, or you have a strategic reserve for things like oil, even, which I think is just a complete game changer if they say that. What did you make of this headline? Because when I saw this, I quickly just typed in central bank gold reserves, and we're talking into the trillions, and I just felt like this could be a game changer.
Yeah, it's a very, very big deal. It would mean the US would own Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, just like they may own other foreign currencies or own gold and whatnot. It's important to note that the US government owns 210,000 Bitcoin, which makes it one of the largest Bitcoin holders in the world. That totals to north of $13 billion worth of Bitcoin. So, in the past, it's always been like, when is the US government going to sell their Bitcoin? How's that going to impact the market? That's been a potential negative headwind for the market. I think a reclassification of those holdings as a strategic reserve asset means that supply never fully comes into the market in one go. And if you're thinking about it from a business perspective or as a trader's perspective, all Trump or all the US really has to do is start legitimizing crypto. And then suddenly this $13 billion holding they have of Bitcoin doubles or triples, and they literally make billions of dollars in P&L, and they can do with that what they want, and maybe they can sell some at a high level, or maybe if they announce it, the rest of the world follows, and they already had a massive head start in being one of the largest holders of Bitcoin. So I think there are lots of strategic benefits to the US of doing this. The cost of the stuff we spoke about 2 weeks ago about feeling like the government is losing control and giving people a greater sense of self-sovereignty and all that. But it does really put the US in a very strong strategic position to announce and do something like that, particularly if other countries follow. Will he go out there and announce it is one thing. Will he go out there and actually execute it is another thing. But I don't see why not. I really don't see why not. And I think even if there's only a 5 or 10% chance of this happening, I don't think it's priced into Bitcoin right now, because it's a hugely, hugely positive thing. Just the fact that the US potentially won't sell their 210,000 holding of Bitcoin, and maybe even potentially buy more Bitcoin. Can you imagine a world where the US government is buying Bitcoin and you have every central bank going out there trading and buying and selling Bitcoin and stuff? It's a pretty insane thing to think about, and it just makes you feel like this asset class, which is just under $3 trillion when, that's lower than the market cap of Nvidia, for example, just makes it feel so cheap. I don't know how to put it, really.
That was the big thing for me, because we'd seen some creep into this world from Central and South American countries. Notably, El Salvador has its own Bitcoin reserve. And you'd seen some South American countries indicate that they might go this way as well. But I think people thought it would be a slow creep to see other larger, let's say G8 countries, move to do this. If the US does this, that's the main thing. They already have 12 billion, and that has always been a worry that they might sell it. Germany sold 3 billion, or they finished selling 3 billion last week. If they do this, I do think you'll see central banks around the world, governments around the world, announce that they might buy some. I think this would be very, very bullish just for the global acceptance of Bitcoin as digital gold. I don't think it's priced in. I think this could be a very, very big bullish move for Bitcoin if it's announced next week. And, I think that could take us up to close to all-time highs again. This feels like we're now in this vacuum where a lot of people gave up on this asset class while tech stocks were ripping, and we headed south below 60K with all that supply potentially coming. In fact, we've completely shrugged off the Mt. Gox distribution, which happened earlier this week. They gave out 6 billion of Bitcoin. It hasn't yet reached a lot of customers. I think it's 7 to 14 days, but I barely see it mentioned. Like it really feels as though that was already priced in. And as soon as that distribution was made as well, we rallied. So it feels as though these are big headlines and a much, incremental headlines over the last week, which has meant that crypto has massively outperformed the rest of macro. It does just feels really, really good.
It's the first time in a while, isn't it, where it feels like stocks are actually a little bit lower today and were lower yesterday, but crypto is higher. And it feels like we've had so much of the opposite. And there's still a massive catch-up trade for crypto to happen if you're looking at it versus stocks, given the move in the last 6 months. But yeah, it's nice to see, at least finally for the first time, that correlation breaking down in the opposite direction where crypto is outperforming. And I think this is it. I really strongly believe this is like the next part of this bull run. Like I think this move higher is the move that takes Bitcoin through all-time highs. Like I personally don't think we'll see a 20% move lower in Bitcoin from now until it re-hits all-time highs, just because I think each incremental headline in between now and the elections is going to be a strongly positive one. And it's just a question of how those probabilities grow, and I would expect them to increase as time goes on.
Yeah, it felt like we could be derailed by the amount of supply, but once the German selling was done, and Mt. Gox seemingly was a kind of a known that people were prepared for, the only real big pocket of supply was this US, 12 billion or so of Bitcoin. And if that's now potentially going to be relabeled as part of their strategic reserve, and who knows, maybe even you get FOMO buying from other central banks, other governments, then I think this could be a big game changer. So it does change the narrative of that supply overhang that we have for crypto. And we also have, going into Q4, you have the FTX repayments, and everyone's getting very, very bullish on that impact. So suddenly that supply-demand imbalance has just shifted straight back to, oh wow, like we might not have these huge pockets of supply coming, or at least if it's just Mt. Gox, then that might be pretty manageable. I think the other thing to mention is why politics has become far more of a big deal is what went on with the Chevron deference, which is actually a few weeks ago, but it's seemingly been making the rounds more in crypto over the last week or so, which is that the SEC seemingly has had its powers massively repealed here. The Supreme Court ruled against the Chevron ruling of 40 years ago, which basically shifts power away from three-letter agencies, including the SEC, and back towards lawmakers, which basically shifts, again, the focus back onto politics in the US. It's one of the few major countries which hasn't got any new crypto regulation, and people in the crypto space have been dying for it. You've seen regulation come out of the UK, regulation come out of the EU, several Asian economies, but the US is kind of just stuck with, we've got enough with our current securities regulations. Now it's seemingly saying the SEC is going to be, at least curtailed in their ability to act against crypto. I looked at this and said, well, politics is going to be very, very important. And suddenly you have people like JD Vance, you have a far more pro-crypto political agenda coming through with the Republicans. It's kind of a perfect storm again for crypto becoming more mainstream, I think, in the US.
Yeah, I think you have to we've been in this paradigm of it feeling like the SEC has had so much power over crypto, and court case after court case, it feels like the final decision of the ETF lies with them, and there's been pushes for it to be regulated by the CFTC and taking power away from the SEC. And I think you've had multiple call-outs of how, I guess, number one, how Gary Gensler is the wrong person for the job, but number two, how they're making decisions and overstepping their boundaries in decisions that shouldn't really lie with them. So I think this ruling is an interesting one because, again, it shows you the potential change in political landscape. And that's one of the things that I think, again, is potentially bullish about like a Trump regime for crypto is the ousting of Gary Gensler, maybe even someone like Hester Peirce taking over the SEC, and maybe even just them having less power in just having such a tight grip on regulation over markets, which perhaps they shouldn't have. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, but the point here is we're recognizing a potential change in who has the power to make these decisions over regulation.
Yeah, regulation by enforcement is generally how crypto has been treated. And I think a lot of people are increasingly, you take off your crypto expert hat and you put on your politics hat in the US. And the reason why that's becoming more important is for rulings like this. It does feel like politics is suddenly going to become more important in crypto, particularly the rules coming out of Congress. So when you start to see things like this happening, it does become a much bigger deal. And it's probably why, we've seen this massive outperformance of crypto as well, with more strong political support for it. So definitely a strong week. In terms of the other majors, Solana's had a massive week. Solana is back up near 170. So we're only, 20% off the cycle highs there. So big move higher there. You've got the ETH ETF next week, it looks like. It's been delayed a few times, but that's also hovering kind of 3,500 area, still a good performance. Interestingly, this week you saw all the different funds come out and give out their fee structure, and everyone kind of came in around the 0.2 to 0.25 range. And what you did see is that Grayscale, they did two things. They kept a 2.5% fee on their main ETH trust, and then they've also brought out this mini trust with a 0.15% fee, which is meant to kind of help the stem of outflows. What do you make of this? Because I looked at this at first glance, and although Sasal's a huge ETH bull, this got some very mixed responses because it feels as though Grayscale have just said, we don't care. Like, we might lose AUM again. And what happened last time, the reason why this is important for viewers is last time this happened with the Bitcoin ETFs, as soon as they were announced or they went live trading, you saw huge outflows coming out of Grayscale, and Bitcoin dropped like 20-25%. It was a big move. What do you think happens here with ETH? Do you think this is all known now and you don't have to worry, or do you think this is dumb?
I personally think it's something that's not to worry about. I think a 2.5% fee is obviously by design. Grayscale's mini ETH ETF will have a 0.2% fee, which puts it in the middle of the road. It doesn't put it as the cheapest, as the cheapest one. I think the lowest fee that I've seen is maybe 0.15%. So they know they're going to lose. They're going to lose investors, or however you want to put it. But the big question is not really what happens with regard to Grayscale outflows. It's what happens to the net flow. And I think when we saw those headline numbers of Bitcoin, remember, like, people had this massive basis trade on in Bitcoin where they owned the Grayscale ETF as being short Bitcoin futures because there was a huge discount in that, which eventually closed completely after the ETFs were approved, and they were just like, cool, we're just going to monetize this trade and we're going to cover the futures and sell GBTC on the other side. So I think that trade also exists on ETH as well, in ETHE versus Ether futures, but I don't think it was anywhere near the size that you saw on Bitcoin, and I don't think the discount got as large as it did on Bitcoin either. So that trade in itself is smaller than it was on Bitcoin, in my belief. And on top of that, again, as I said, it's about net flows. So if someone's like, cool, I don't really want to pay 2.5%, but I still want to be long ETH, where do I go? Well, I can go to the Grayscale mini ETF, or I can go to Fidelity or BlackRock or whatever it is and just pay a lower fee. And that's the thing we need to really keep an eye on, like what the net flow is at the end of each day, and not just what the ETHE, which is Grayscale's ETH ETF, not just the alpha number on that, basically.
Yeah, I think you're going to see decent inflows. I think you're going to see decent inflows because of the basis trade too. I think people are going to pile in and do the same basis trade they were doing on Bitcoin, and they're going to do it on ETH. So I think this is probably known at this stage. If I'm honest, though, I'm still just more bullish on Solana. Like, I feel like this is the number one thing that everyone's focused on ETH. And Larry Fink did go on CNBC, and once you get someone like talking about Bitcoin this week, and he was super bullish, and everyone in crypto got bullish about it too. There are going to be people that go on CNBC and Bloomberg and get very, very bullish on ETH, and it's good to have more and more proponents of it. But I don't know, like when you see Solana outperform ETH this much the week before the ETF, I feel as though this is defining ETH for a little bit here. And although I own all three, like I'm not sitting here, and I don't think ETH is going to 5,000. But I think Solana could keep on going. So out of those three bags, I think I'm not bearish. I think you're going to see decent inflows. I think this is what's going to define ETH though for the medium term. Yeah. And I don't think they're going to knock it out the park. Is basically what I'm saying. I think it's going to be slow and steady. I think we're probably going to hit in the mid single digits of billion inflows, but I don't know if that takes me to like crazy figures.
It's pretty interesting to see the price of Sol ETH, the ratio of Solana to ETH, ever since the ETH ETF got approved, and it's pretty much up only. Like I think Sol ETH has moved from like 0.038 to 0.048. So I think Solana's outperformed ETH by something like 35% since the ETH ETF got approved, which is interesting. It tells you, in my opinion, the reason for that is I just think Sol is a higher beta thing than ETH, and I think crypto overall is going higher from here, and an ETH ETF is bullish for crypto overall. I think that's the main reason. But it makes you wonder: is Solana a better play? Because if the ETH, there's a lot of ETH money which I think is like, should I be in Sol? And if the ETH ETF disappoints, I think you would see a lot of people throwing in the towel and moving to Sol based on that. But you can't call a disappointment or a success. You can't call it disappointment or a success in the first day or two, because Bitcoin was the same thing, right? The flows weren't great at the beginning, and then you just had monster inflows day after day after day. So it's going to be a hard one to judge and an interesting one to watch, I think.
Yeah, look, I might be mid-curving it because, Bitcoin outperformed most altcoins this cycle, and that's just because it had consistent inflows. My guess is just that I don't think you see an extreme either way. I don't think it disappoints overly, but I don't think they knock it out of the park. I think you just see like okay levels of inflows, but which would still be massive. Probably the second most successful ETF ever, in terms of getting inflows in. But for me, that chart for me is kind of up only this cycle with the fees that Solana is generating and the activity that's going on there. It's out of those majors. I always get drawn back to it, even though I own all three.
Where do you think it goes? I'm just looking at it now on my screen. It's probably like about 25% off all-time highs, the ratio of Sol to ETH, which we hit earlier this year.
It's a little bit difficult because Solana is obviously its emissions are much higher. This is an asset which inflates at like 6 to 7% a year versus ETH, which is kind of at 1 to 2% right now. But at the same time, the fees generated on Solana, or at least the total economic value, is now comparable to ETH. In fact, it's flipped ETH several times, and it's still about a fifth to a sixth of the price, right? So I think Solana could double, and pretty comfortably. Like it could double, and I don't even think I would worry about the price of ETH. I think you could get very bullish on what I think Solana's market value could be here, but I do think at the end of the day, inflation matters, and I do think that will. One thing that in this experiment of cryptocurrency has proven is that if you want something to be like money, you kind of do need that rate of inflation to like keep the wheels of society going, in my opinion. That's what keeps your fees low. That's what keeps it fast. If you want it to be like gold, then you want it to be like Bitcoin and have like a fixed rate of supply. But ETH is kind of caught in between of trying to be both. And I feel like it's probably done a bad job of both at the moment. Like or at least not an optimal job of both. So when you say like, why do you want to own ETH? It's no longer deflating, and it's not got that pace, that throughput of that you need for like a money, which seemingly, as we're testing out different ways to speed run a currency, it feels like you kind of need that levels of inflation, at least at the start, to keep the grease on the wheels, so to speak. And what you end up with ETH is kind of a slow, expensive chain, which gets 1% to 2% of inflation. So part of that's architecture differences, but part of that is just, I think, the way that the chain, for it to be cheap and fast, the validators have got to be paid. So that's just the way I kind of view it. But yeah, I think you can be bullish on all three. I think you can start to think about if Bitcoin gets called a strategic asset here. I think you could see 100K before the end of the year.
Yeah, easily.
So I feel like you're betting on the fastest horse in a race where they're all going to finish in the top three. Like, we're in for a very, very bullish period here for crypto. So I don't think you need to necessarily get too caught up in which horse to back. But of those three, it's definitely Solana right now. We did get some other news out on this week, which is that Grayscale, we're going to launch another fund. This is their AI fund, which is, they called it a decentralized AI fund, and they had a hodgepodge of different AI fund coins in there. Some of them are kind of more deep-in-esque rather than AI, but it just flicked a switch in my head, particularly with Larry Fink going on CNBC and being so bullish on crypto, that we could now see like a huge explosion of TradFi going into crypto. What did you make of that fund and these headlines?
Yeah, it just has to happen, doesn't it? It just has to happen. I think BlackRock having a tokenized fund and Grayscale launching this fund, and Grayscale obviously have been involved in the past with Bitcoin, ETH, etc. I think there's even a Solana trust or something like that, right? With Grayscale, but having like an AI fund, it gives it very much the vibe of one of these mixed ETFs, which I don't know, like a retail ETF, for example, which has a bunch of retail companies in it. It does start to give you, these are like very like traditional finance investable products that people want to own if they want to get exposure to something. And it just feels like this is going to be the start of it. It's not, you have to remember, like, these products, the reason why these guys want to have these products is, number one, they can charge a ton of fees on them. The fees they're charging on these crypto ETFs are materially higher than the fees they make on regular way ETFs. And number two is if they have the demand for it. And anecdotally, and you probably are the same thing, you just meet a ton of people who want some exposure to crypto, but they just don't want to make a wallet. They don't want to, explain to them how to buy something on chain. It's like, oh, well, you need to install MetaMask, then you need to write down your seed phrase on a piece of paper, then I need to go through that whole thing. Everyone's heard this argument before. So the reason why it's such a big opportunity for TradFi to get in is because there is a huge amount of demand for it. It doesn't really exist right now. And they can charge a huge amount of fees on it, and they can make a ton of money. And I think the success of Bitcoin ETF has shown you that's sort of like the proof of concept, if you like, and it's worked. And now I think you'll start to see them branch out into other things and other funds. And it's just a way for people to get exposure to crypto without directly having to buy crypto. And it's such a volatile asset that some people who maybe want some exposure to it in their PA don't want to be the ones trading it. Maybe you're a ultra high net worth individual and you're like, I need some crypto in my PA, but I don't want to be the person deciding, do I buy ETH? Do I buy Bitcoin? Do I buy which AI coin do I buy? What does it all mean? You just want to put it into a fund where you trust someone to do it all for you and pay the management fee. And I do believe there is demand for that. And I think we're just going to see more and more of this. You obviously need a strong crypto market to continue and stay resilient for a good amount of time. If you have what happened in 2022 with FTX, etc., definitely shakes confidence and stifles potential investment into the space. So you need a good, clean run, which hopefully we get, but it's also crypto, so you never know. But it's hard for me to see this TradFi adoption of it not continue. And I think we're going to see that adoption accelerate in this post-ETF era.
Yeah, this gets me bullish on altcoins because this market is built for ETFs. ETFs help bridge that gap between investors that don't particularly know about the end markets or the end stock market, for example, or the individual single stocks in them or individual assets in them, but want to have exposure to them. You used to see this even in our market, in like the high yield market. If you wanted to have some exposure to high yield bonds, but you didn't really want to go through and do due diligence on every single bond, you might buy the high yield bond ETF. If you wanted to have exposure to South Korean equities, you might buy the South Korea ETF. And that's a prime example. If you don't really know the coins or the stocks behind it, but you want to get some exposure, I think we're going to see the ETF industry go crazy on this space, particularly for altcoins. Because if I want to pick out a meme coin index, maybe that's what I want to have. If I want to get some exposure to decentralized AI coins, maybe that's what I want to do. L1 coins, DPIN, all these sectors in crypto which are difficult to invest in sometimes for the average user, but they know they want to have exposure to. I think you're going to see more and more of this, and I think this is the way that BlackRock will go. If you start to see like what we've just seen with the comments by JD Vance or by Trump, where you get a much more pro-crypto agenda coming out of Congress, where a lot of these things don't have to be called securities, I think this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a huge move by these big ETF providers into crypto because it's built for it. It's built for it. And I think also that can get you bullish on altcoins in general a bit more. Because if you start to see traditional finance approach this space and dissect it in a way where altcoins can be brought to the front a bit more, I do think you can get very, very bullish on it. So yeah, I think that was one of the main things. And then I think the other main thing that we were going to talk about was Polymarket, which was, I was going to bring it up in kind of the left corner, but I'll go on it separately. But Polymarket has had a massive week. So they did 100 million of volume in the whole of June. And they did 20 million just yesterday. So you are seeing absolutely huge volumes go through Polymarket. Interestingly, you saw Nate Silver, who is perhaps one of the best known US political analysts, let's say. He does data analysis across all 50 states and is famously called many of the previous elections. He came out and has now been an advisor to Polymarket, but you're seeing huge volume go through them, which was seemingly going through meme coins a little bit and now has moved massively into these sort of prediction markets, finding the source of truth markets. Do you think this is crypto's killer app? Have we found the thing that you can just explain to people? This runs on crypto rails. This is essentially allowing you to gamble or find truth about any particular outcome. Well, or are we just getting too hyperbolic at this stage because we're going into the election and that would naturally see huge amounts of volume?
Yeah, look, I think if you're assessing it on a total volume metric, the US elections are probably one of the greatest or most iconic betting moments out there. So, it's hard to. I wouldn't extrapolate these numbers. Basically, I wouldn't extrapolate an election year numbers across the overall business. I think the concept and idea of being able to bet on pretty much anything is really incredible. But the question is, why would you go to Polymarket for something versus using Betfair or Bet365 or whatever? And I understand, like, if you're in a jurisdiction which doesn't have these rails, you can go on Polymarket and do stuff, and you can do it with crypto, and it's pretty easy. I think the main thing about Polymarket is, like, look, if you're like many crypto people out there and you have made a lot of crypto wealth and you want to just gamble with your crypto wealth, just like you gamble with anything, it's a much easier way to just seamlessly gamble with crypto rather than having to like off-ramp your money into fiat and then go put on a bet on Betfair or whatever. So it's great because I think you are directly accessing the most degenerate market there is in the world, which is very crypto rich right now. And it's an election year, so all these things marry up quite nicely for Polymarket. But for me, we'll need to see consistent volume over multiple years for it to really make sense. And yeah, like I understand how you can explain a use case of crypto to normies there, but someone might shoot you back and say, well, how is this any different to Betfair?
Yeah, I think the two things are jurisdiction, but also they're more bespoke. So for example, yesterday, I think they saw 10 million of volume or maybe even 15 million of volume go through the site. And a lot of it was just based on what Trump might say in his RNC speech. And we spoke about this kind of a month ago, that you were starting to see meme coins be a bit more like that, like whatever, more like attention coins. Now, seemingly, you're starting to see some of that volume kind of just move to Polymarket, like people just being able to gamble essentially on something over a very short period and it being quite bespoke like that. So I agree with you that the long-term future of this, I think, is more picking out things that you wouldn't be able to find at a bookmaker's in jurisdictions where you are able to gamble. And then secondly, is the idea that this PvP model seemingly is allowed in the US. I'm not really too sure. Like, it feels like one of these things where they've got funding for it. I saw in the past that they had been investigated by the CFTC, I think it was, but then it was resolved. But I think prediction markets are okay in the US. Like, I just don't know. It feels like one of these things where if the CFTC or the SEC decide that they weren't, then we'd just be like, oh, okay. But seemingly it's kind of below the radar and it's being allowed. They've got Peter Thiel backing it. They're getting people like Nate Silver on board. They're not being quiet about being big in US election markets. So if it's being allowed, it's probably being allowed, which is, I think, is pretty great. And this does feel like crypto's major app. I think in the last 10 minutes before we go through to questions, we were going to do a bit of a new section called Left Curve Corner, which is kind of the section I call of Mando Minutes, which is the daily newsletter I put out. You can go check it out at mandominutes.com. But there was a section called Left Curve Corner where we're going to go through the 5 top things that were in the kind of left curve bit of the market, which I know not everyone needs to listen to, but we felt like it's worth a 10-minute section. So we'll go through all the top 5, and then we'll maybe discuss the ones that were the most important to you, Obi. So number 1, cat coins. We saw MOG and PopCat both hit all-time high. So both of these are not yet listed on Binance. They're both approaching nearly $1 billion market cap. PopCat, I think, is around 900 million today. So that might be the first cat coin to reach $1 billion. There's big expectations that they might get listed on Binance. MOG has obviously been one of the top performers this cycle. I think it's a year old today. We've mentioned it a couple of times on this show. I know you're a holder there, Obi, so we can go into that a bit later. Secondly was Polymarket. So it was the idea that a lot of these politified coins, so a lot of the coins that we were speaking about probably about a month ago, so Bowden, Tremp, a lot of the smaller ones around the VP candidates, they've all died a pretty painful death over the last week or so. And a lot of the bets that you would assume would do well, like the Trump meme coin, has actually done very, very badly, even though the chances of him becoming the next president have gone much higher. So that's been a kind of a bit weird move, and that a lot of that volume is now being moved to Polymarket, and a lot of the bets are happening there on Polymarket. I think huge bets going through at the moment that Biden is going to drop out. I think it's hit 90% on Polymarket. So please go check it out. I think it's worth looking at. The third one was Miggles. Miggles was the cat coin on Base. It was a funny advertisement by Coinbase this week. They basically ran an ad about a cat called Miggles, that it was the creator had owned the IP of it, and they actually allowed users to mint an NFT, and Miggles NFT on the back of that. Separately, somebody created a Miggles meme coin. That has hit 150 million today. So a massive move in 2 days. That's been the biggest mover on Base, I think, in months. But yeah, that's definitely been the biggest mover in meme coins this week. We had smaller moves in Solana meme coins, so Giga and Bonk. Both of those hit all-time highs. I think Giga's approaching 200 million. Ponky has breached 300 million, so big moves there. And then finally, Doodles in the NFT space, they released the trailer for a short film they are doing. The floor price went up 50% on the back of that. We've seen a bit of a move higher in NFTs, but that was definitely the biggest move. People getting very, very bullish on Doodles and their ability to create Web3 IP. So which of those stood out for you, OSF? What do you want to talk about before we go to questions?
Yeah, let's talk about the cat coins, I guess. Let's talk about... I know why you're laughing.
Mog, Popcat, or Miggles? Which one do you want to get into? Which one are you most bullish on here?
I don't know. Like, the Miggles thing is an interesting one because, to my understanding, it was just an NFT thing that was launched by Coinbase, and someone anonymously made a Mr. Miggles coin, which is now skyrocketed to $150 million market cap in 2 or 3 days. It's one of those where, like, I haven't been like super plugged into trading stuff recently because I'm quite comfortable with my positioning and how I'm set up. But it's one of those where you look at it and just think, man, that was just so obvious. Like, why didn't I go in on something like that? There's obviously some sort of like Coinbase cabal behind it. I think the Mog and Popcat stuff is super interesting, mainly because they're sort of like becoming bellwethers for the meme market a little bit. Like, I know you have stuff like Whiff and Pepe, which are multi-billion-dollar market caps, but for Whiff or Pepe to do a 2x, it's a big move, right? Pepe is about $5 billion. If it goes to $10 billion, that's a 2x, and that's a very, very big move, and it's not that easy to achieve that. Whereas when you look at some of these like mid-tier coins, which are sort of below $1 billion, but north of $500 million, and they start pulling these 100, 200% moves, that I think could be an interesting bellwether for memes overall, because it creates a lot of wealth, and that money trickles down and goes into the smaller stuff. So I'm interested to see how those fare. Like if one of these coins does hit $1 billion, if one of these coins does get onto Binance, does it kickstart another whole meme season again? And one thing I would note is, look, you have Solana that's reclaimed 170 now during the show, and actually Bitcoin above 66K. So we've finally broken the curse of bad price action on these shows. But the Sol at 170, and
look at it go.
Yeah. And with Popcat, heading towards $1 billion. And if that gets Binance listing, does that recreate this great meme season we saw on Solana back in Q1 this year? And I am of the belief that the whole left curve part of the market, while most of it is inherently worth zero and will drop to zero at some point in the next 12 months, I think we still have another left curve season to go. And I still feel like Solana meme coins is kind of like the place where there's least resistance in that happening. So I think it's a good thing to just keep an eye on what these coins do, because you may be like, I missed out on Popcat and it's just hit $1 billion, but if Popcat goes to like $1.5 billion and gets listed on Binance, it probably creates opportunity, I think, in other coins within that are maybe related or correlated to it. As always, meme coins are gambling. Slightly better odds than being at the casino, so don't put your net worth into it. But I've made a lot of money in meme coins this year. You have, and a lot of people out there have done. So I do think it's worth paying some attention to it, because that's just where there is money to be made, I think, in trading.
Yeah, it feels like out of all of those, Mog is probably my number one choice, just because I feel like it's a native crypto meme. I feel like that creates sort of diehard community. But it does feel like, if Solana's about to go to 200 here, which it feels like it might, I think a lot of these, I'm more bullish on the mid-tier memes, mid-tier altcoins. A lot of altcoins have actually bounced pretty aggressively from their lows. Even things like XRP are up about 50 to 60%. But I think you'll start to see a lot of these hit all-time highs. And as we know with a lot of these meme coins, is that you get listings. So you get a bunch of different ones look for listings. I don't think Binance has made major listings since it said it would review its whole policy around them recently because of all the bad launchpad coins. If I was sitting there and that these are all on Bybit and they're looking to get listed, I think they'll all get listed, if I'm honest. I think you'll see a listing for most probably Mog, Popcat, and maybe even something like Ponky, because Ponky I think is also on Bybit. So I think we're set for a big old meme coin revival. I don't know if the top meme coins will hit. I don't know if Dog with Hat's going to 5. I feel as though I'd rather own mid-tier ones. I don't think Bonk will hit a new all-time high. Maybe Pepe. Like for me, I feel like this one you need to be down in the trenches, I think, to see the outsized returns, or at least to hit a new all-time high. If Solana goes to like Solana is actually today, for example, is up as much as Pepe and with, right? That says a lot. You know,
I think it's usually, yeah, but that happens a lot. I think it's usually a lagged effect. I think you have the move first in Sol, and then everyone's like, oh shit, and then they make the move. It's not usually, when you enter this like new paradigm, it's the people a little bit cagey, and then you have the move afterwards. And I think it's happened a few times this year where you have that move in Sol, and it's like, it hasn't really moved. I think it's hard to snapshot it on the basis of one day, but when you look back over like a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever it is, I don't know. I personally think if Sol goes to 200, which I think it will, I would struggle to not see whiff above 4 and getting close to all-time highs. Like I do think.
You think all-time high?
Yeah, I think it's the number one. I still think it's the number one meme on Solana, and unlike any other memes, it's had periods where it's been crushed and it's always come out of it. You know.
Yeah.
So
let's see then. I think it's going to be. It's a great problem to be in, isn't it? Just like how high are things going to go if Bitcoin goes to 200K, if Solana goes to 200. So I think, let's just revel in the idea that we're talking about degen stuff again on the show and not just about Bitcoin, ETH, and Solana. We'll maybe go to the questions now, I think, for the last 10 minutes or so. I don't know if we have
I've got them up here.
Back.
I like being the question master. Okay, so first one is from Paul on the Real Vision website. Long term, do you guys have a preference for allocations on Bitcoin, ETH, and Sol? So long term, maybe meaning 12 months plus, I would guess.
Yeah, so I've been pretty vocal that I've moved very heavily into the Jupiter liquidity token, JLP, and that actually has set defined ratios of 45% Solana, 10% Bitcoin, 10% ETH, and then 35% stables. So out of that risky portfolio, I guess I'm heavily weighted towards Solana, but I do have allocations to both. And that's kind of where I'm living on as well. The reason why I have it in there as well is because the thing makes about 50% APY. It's obviously DeFi, so be wary about that sort of stuff. There was a big hack on an Indian exchange this month, or this week even, and there's been several DeFi hacks, so just be aware. But that's where my funds are. I think I'll keep it in there for a while.
I honestly don't know what I think those allocations should be. I think for a lot of this year, I've said I'd rather be weighted heavily in ETH and Sol and Bitcoin as the third, because of how much Bitcoin dominance has risen this year. So I think if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have maybe said something like 40-40-20 ETH, Sol, Bitcoin. But this talk about it being a reserve asset makes me want to actually own more Bitcoin and maybe have Bitcoin as a higher part of that ratio. So maybe a third. I think the one that I am starting to get worried on because of how the ETF flows are going to be is ETH. And that's the one that I think maybe has the weakest arguments right now. But I don't know. We'll see. I've been very bullish ETH on these on these shows, and starting to feel a little bit more worried on it as we get into the ETFs next week.
I'm back out now, man.
Our next question from Melvin on the Real Vision website. Have you guys changed anything to your bags in the recent dips? If so, have you added more to the 3 majors or more to your meme bags? So I guess your JLP is really the main thing that you've done, right, Michael?
Yeah, but I did that a while. I did that probably April time. So it's been a while since I did that. In terms of stuff over the last month or so, I guess I added to that position. I actually borrowed against it and bought more. And some like mid-tier memes, basically. But I haven't touched my Pepe bag. I haven't touched my JLP. I've only really added to my JLP bag and some mid-tier memes. But no, I want to sound like super smart and say, when we were trading below 50, 60K, like I was going absolutely massive. I was just slowly adding throughout that whole period. It wasn't like I just timed the bottom and bought a ton. And I think the great thing about this is like the violence of the move has left a lot of people sidelined. So just holding and maybe buying a little bit, I think means you've outperformed a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the last major thing I really did was I took some profits and sold a bunch to fiat maybe like a month or two ago, right before things dropped. And when we had the drop, I was extremely tempted to buy back in and put some fiat back in, which I never actually did because I'm still running some big positions. So I just never really actually did. And then I thought, because I did get very bullish when prices dropped. And I was like, should I be adding more risk here? And then I was like, okay, I don't want to put more fiat back in because the whole reason why I took fiat out was just to take some cash out and have something to show for this cycle. So I was like, should I increase my risk, go more into memes, or go more into other high beta stuff? And I looked at my position and it's like, well, right now I'm probably like 65% of my portfolio is in meme coins, with the vast majority of that being MOG and WIF. So I was like, well, I'm already like pretty exposed. Yeah, I'm already like pretty deeply heavily weighted to meme coins anyway. I already have a very high beta portfolio. So I decided not to actually do anything or change anything, which is a hard thing to do because we had a ton of volatility in the last month and we had this great big crash and we had stuff rallying and you feel all sorts of things like, in the crash, I'm like, am I too overweight now on meme coins? Should I be more defensive on the rally up? It's like, should I move back in and all that stuff? And I think sometimes you just need to like your positioning and acknowledge that you feel you had the right positioning and not do anything and not touch anything. And amazingly, I've actually not really materially touched anything for the last month or two, despite all the price action we've had. And I think I'm, just looking at things now, I'm pretty happy and grateful that that's the case. And I like this way. I'm pretty risk on. Like that portfolio weighting I just spoke about is a very aggressive portfolio weighting. So I'm pretty risk on and positioned, I think, for a good piece of price action, I would say. All right, the last question. This is from Longevity is the Key on YouTube. Nice username. Should we be afraid to sell Bitcoin at the top of the cycle and then not be able to buy in the bear next cycle? I don't know if I fully understand that question. I guess maybe it's alluding to, if you sell too early and then you're not able to get back in, or I don't know. How do you interpret that question, man, Michael? I'm struggling to. Do you want to repeat it?
No. This isn't a spelling bee. I think the question really is just like, when should you sell and should you be aware of the next bear market? For me, I think you just have to dollar cost average out of it. I have some targets for where Solana wants to be. And I've said to myself, if it hits some of those targets, I'm going to exit out. In my mind, I do think that Solana is gearing itself up for breakpoint. I think we'll probably get an announcement, significant announcements then, particularly also about Fire Dancer. So I think you could have this like parabolic Q4 for Solana. So I've basically got price targets around that sort of level where I think I'm happy to kind of exit out of. But you're never going to do it perfectly. So I think it'll have to be over a certain period once those targets are hit as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for me, I have price targets to sell, to take some more chips off the table. And, for ETH, maybe that's something like 5K. For Sol, that's maybe like 300 area. For Bitcoin, maybe that's like 100K. And I'm talking about like taking 20, 30, 40% off the table then. And then beyond that, I don't know. I just feel like DCAing is the right strategy. You can't expect to sell your entire stack at the top. I mean, some pretty well-known influencers out there have gone all in cash in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and now people are out there sitting sidelined with this big move higher, and you just don't want to be in a position where you've sold everything because you thought it was the top, and things rally another 20%, and you think they're going higher, and that becomes a very difficult trading position to be in. I actually find that position much more challenging to be in than buying something and watching it go lower, and knowing I have the patience to hold and ride through it. So those are my targets, to sell maybe somewhere in between 20 to 40% of what I have. But you should create those targets for yourselves. And the important thing is to stick to them as well, because if you don't stick to your targets, then stuff drops again. You'll be kicking yourself as to like why I didn't sell it, and it's a tough thing to do in the face of great momentum. But it's what makes the difference between someone who has money to show for their trading versus someone who constantly round trips. And yeah, I think that's it for the question. So I think we can call it a day there. Glad to be back in some nice green markets today. And it's nice to see that we've broken the curse of negative price action on REKT Vision. We're actually now ending the show with crypto having rallied. So thank you to the crypto gods for changing our fortunes. But yeah, that was REKT Vision. Make sure you guys are following us on X, OSF_REKT, REKT Mando, Real Vision Crypto. Next week, I believe next week we're back on with REKT Vision again, but make sure you sign up at realvision.crypt.com/RVC if you want to access the drinks with that Mando and OSF sessions, which are exclusive just to Real Vision subscribers. But otherwise, we'll see you next Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time or 4:30 p.m. British Summer Time. Have a lovely weekend, everyone, and just enjoy those green candles.
Yeah, guys.
Make large crypto trades with Kraken OTC. Execute orders of more than 100,000 off the open exchange through our premium OTC trading service. Get 24/7 access to deep liquidity, minimal slippage, and competitive execution and settlement services. Private and secure trading options include chatting securely with our trade desk for a personalized high-touch service, or use our self-service RFQ for super fast, automated OTC trading. Non-investment advice. Crypto trading involves risk of loss and is offered to U.S. customers through Payward Interactive Inc. For more information, go to realvision.com/Kraken OTC.